Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Charlie Sylvia with Cruise Lines International Association. I'd like to thank all of you for being on today's call. The topic of today's webinar is the 2017 CLIA Consumer Study, which was conducted in collaboration with CLIA and JD Power. And we are thrilled to have JD Power as our partner on this particular project. And with us today, I have an esteemed colleague here today. Jennifer Corwin is the Associate Practice Lead for the Global Travel and Hospitality Practice at JD Power. Jennifer is responsible for thought leadership and providing insights and analyses in the company's Voice of the Customer research across the travel and hospitality centers. Her work spans multiple industry verticals within the practice, including hotels, airlines, rental car companies, cruise lines, destinations, and airports. So without further ado, Jennifer, welcome to today's call. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Charlie. I'm very excited to present to your membership the results of this CLIA study that we've put together. So I'd like to start by just giving a brief overview of the methodology so we can kind of level set as we go through today's presentation. All of the data presented was gathered during a about 10 minutes web survey. It was fielded in August of 2017 throughout the United States and Canada. The sample source, so the respondents that we asked to take the survey came from consumer panels, and in order to qualify for this study, they had to be 18 years of age or older, have an income of $50,000 or higher annually, and have traveled to take a vacation in the past 3 years. Another issue or another subset there that we're going to talk about in terms of cruisers and non-cruisers. You're going to see this breakout throughout the presentation, so I want to be very clear on what that is. So there are 792 cruisers in the study, and those are consumers who have cruised in the past 3 years, and they've taken that cruise vacation for at least 3 nights or more. And they may have also taken a land-based vacation, but if they took a cruise, we are qualifying them as a cruiser. So the non-cruisers are those who did not take a cruise vacation within the last 3 years. So that's not to say that they've never taken a cruise, but just for the purposes of this study, they are non-cruisers, but they have taken some other sort of vacation. So we'll have that data for a nice comparison point for you. We did collect the data to reflect a 90% US, 10% Canadian mix in terms of the region of the respondents and their country of origin. So here's a little bit of the demographics. As you can see, we do have a good representation, and the overall sample, the demographic age is 52. For the most part, we do see a slightly higher percentage of females within the sample. We have a nice representation though across the different generation groups, and we'll define those for you a little bit later on in the presentation. But these are going from youngest to oldest in terms of age as we go down the chart. And we also have the demographic breakout across ethnicity there. Similarly, we can see that the demographics are pretty comparable across cruisers and non-cruisers. There are some differences in terms of genders. Particularly, we see a higher percentage of females in the non-cruiser category. But for the most part, we're just showing this to you so you have that level set there.
This is interesting, Jenny.
Yes, continuing on with the demographics here, we have the household income, annual household income of cruisers, non-cruisers, as well as the overall sample. So you can see for the most part, obviously we're targeting respondents at least $50,000, so that's the qualifying mark there. But we do see the majority of our sample falling between that $50,000 mark and the $125,000 annually there. Looking at the recent vacationers here, just cruisers specifically, when was your most recent cruise vacation? So we do see that more than 4 out of 5 cruisers took a vacation within the past 12 months, which is consistent with the data that we had received last year in our 2016 study. So you can see here the dark blue shading there, 44% of cruisers have taken their cruise within the last 6 months, and 40% are in that 6 months to 1 year ago. So what's really nice was that we know that this data, when we ask about their cruise experience, was pretty fresh in the cruisers' minds. And it looks like a pretty consistent pattern of cruising year over year.
I'm definitely part of that 44%, Jennifer.
Wonderful. Lucky you.
Many times over.
So we can see here, when we look at just in general, leisure travel is expected to increase, particularly so for cruisers. So when they're asked in the next 12 months, compared to the previous 12 months, how do you plan to travel, more, about the same, or less, we are seeing the majority of cruisers are saying they're going to see about the same travel, if not more, as well as the non-cruisers, very similar patterns. So in terms of general leisure travel outlook, these are very promising numbers. The majority of our respondents are saying they are going to travel more or about the same in the next 12 months.
Very encouraging.
Great, yes. Now when we get into satisfaction and loyalty, this is where we get into some really great statistics breaking out consumers and non-cruisers based on their vacation types. So when we asked different types of, we also have this split out by demographics, but the particularly interesting ones are cruisers versus non-cruisers, those top two rows there that you're really going to want to focus on. So their best overall vacation. We just asked them to select their best overall vacation, and we do see cruisers most often are selecting a cruise, a cruise vacation or an ocean or sea voyage. 58% of cruisers, that's their best overall vacation type. And the rest of them are kind of split across, but we do see river cruises coming up pretty high, as well as all-inclusive resorts and land-based vacations at 8% altogether.
Jennifer, could
even for non-cruisers, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, just asking, could you add the 58 and the 8% to represent overall cruising at 64%?
I would think so, yes.
Got it.
That makes perfect sense to me, because these are saying your best vacation types. So had we asked them to keep choosing, I imagine some of those people would, choose multiple things as their multiple best vacation types. So.
Good.
And so then looking at non-cruisers, so even non-cruisers, 12% are stating that a cruise vacation or ocean sea voyage is their favorite vacation type, as well as 2% in the river cruise vacation. So if we add those together, we're at 14%, and those are people who have not taken a cruise in the last 3 years. So for this study, they're kind of non-cruisers. We do see land-based vacations through a trip, not a resort, is showing up as the highest percentage, but I think we'll get into some other data that may explain why certain people are going to kind of pull that out as their best vacation type as we go through here. But pretty consistent across the genders as well as ethnicities, that cruise vacations are coming out relatively high in terms of the best vacation type overall. Another great story. This is really the same data, but we're looking at it across the generation groups. And we're looking at it just for cruises. So this is just a more visual representation, but I love this visual because if you really look down to the two cruise types at the bottom there, you could see overwhelmingly across all the generations, those are the best vacation types, right? Ocean cruises, I mean, are really just hitting it out of the park across every generation. But particularly those traditionalists, as well as the Gen X, are really rating it high. But that's not to say that Gen Y and Boomers aren't loving cruises as well. So for non-cruisers, again, just a visual breakout across the generations. You do see land-based resort and those all-inclusive resorts are kind of popping up as some of the most frequent, as well as if you look for the traditionalists specifically, friends and relatives. And we're going to get into some really interesting stories as to why we think that traditionalists are really going to go with more friends and relatives based on things they may have already seen or done. But still, across all generation groups, a nice representation for the cruise types as well for being the best vacation.
And I thank you for highlighting, Jennifer, the fact that non-cruisers for this particular study was defined as someone who had not taken a cruise in the past 3 years, because I think that really gives the context that helps make sense of it all.
Right. Yeah. And I think we had originally kind of decided we were going to call them just vacationers, but I think we thought the non-cruiser designation really helped kind of clear it up what we're really talking about here. So when we mix it all together, bring out all of the respondents, this is a mix of cruisers and non-cruisers. Looking across the generation groups, you do see ocean cruises are still overwhelmingly labeled as the best trip, particularly over 30%, so over 1/3 basically in each generation group. But we see really a strong performance in terms of Gen X and those traditionalist travelers as well. So now we're going to look at satisfaction by vacation type. So we already know which ones they think are the best, our cruisers and our non-cruisers. But when we look at satisfaction by vacation type, these are really great numbers. So we've got our overall, so this is the total study in that first column, followed by the cruisers. Now, obviously for non-cruisers, we don't have any scores for cruise vacations or river vacations, which makes a lot of sense since they haven't been on one recently. But I want to point out the first number my eye goes to, just based on my historical relationship with JD Power data. And it's interesting to note, these are on a 1 to 10 scale. So if you look at the cruiser satisfaction for a river cruise at 9.05,
wow,
that's an astounding number. Yeah, we don't see 9s a lot. I mean, so that's the average person is rating that a 9 out of 10. That's wonderful. And even the cruiser satisfaction for on a cruise vacation at 8.97, these are just wonderful scores. So I think you have something really strong here saying that overall, you know, people really rate cruises high, river cruises as well as just ocean cruises as well. But cruisers specifically, they really love to cruise and they're happy with their experience so far.
Now putting this into kind of, Jennifer, marketing or sales terms for our travel agency owners and agents out there to use, these are remarkably high numbers, aren't they? Wouldn't you say remarkable or extraordinary could be modifiers that could be used to describe this data?
Absolutely. We often, so we label in our study oftentimes the perfect 10 is outstanding. Oh. And this is about as close to outstanding as you can get, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so these are great numbers, and very positive for the cruise industry as a whole, to show that it's not just, obviously cruisers are just very, very satisfied with those cruise vacations. So now obviously leisure travel is something that's satisfying in general. So when you look at these other vacation types, we do see that cruisers and non-cruisers are pretty satisfied with other vacation types as well, but it's just not to that same extent as cruises. So here's another metric that's similar to measuring overall satisfaction, but a little bit different because it gets at your intent to recommend. So Net Promoter, and what we're looking at for those of you who aren't familiar, is really, we ask the question, what is your likelihood to recommend this vacation type to your friends, relatives, and colleagues? So Net Promoter scores for cruise vacations in general, anything a positive score is considered a good Net Promoter score. So this is actually a calculation, and what we're doing is we're taking the number of people who say they're going to promote a cruise vacation. So those are saying 9 or 10, my likelihood to promote this cruise vacation, versus those who score a 0 through 5. We call those people detractors, and we're going to kind of break this out in the next couple slides for you. But those would be people that we think that may say something negative about a cruise vacation. So when we subtract out the detractors from your promoters, if we get a positive score, that means you have more people saying positive things about your vacation type or your brand, whatever it is you're measuring, in this case, cruise vacations. So anything positive is good. The higher the positive score, obviously the better. 100 is perfect. I've never seen a 100 perfect NPS score, so these numbers in the 60s and the 50s are excellent.
And ladies and gentlemen, just to give you some context, Jennifer is a certified expert in terms of Net Promoter Score. Well, it's true, isn't it, Jennifer?
Yes.
And so,
yes.
Well, I just want to underscore the monumental nature of this data, because NPS is the type of data that presidents of companies, CEOs, look at to make high-level decisions. So this is significant data that shows that this industry is very positively viewed. Would that be accurate to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, if you ask a lot of CEOs what for one single number that they're measuring outside of revenue, of course, it is this. This is their Net Promoter Score. It's the kind of number that they're using to summarize all of their customer satisfaction efforts. And so yes, these numbers in the 50s and 60s are really, really great numbers to see. In general, across all of our travel and hospitality studies at J.D. Power, we do measure Net Promoter, and we are Bain certified, as you mentioned. And we see some high scores, but generally 60 is tops. So these are wonderful scores. And so next we have very similar to the Net Promoter, but different, right? So we had covered what's your likelihood to recommend. This is your likelihood of booking a cruise for your next trip. So are you going to come back? And you can see across the board, over 55% of people, for males and females, equally split, saying definitely will. I definitely will be booking a cruise for my next trip. So this is really a great number as well. We don't often see people saying committing so hard to that definitely will. We see a lot of numbers in the probably will and definitely will. And if you combine those two numbers, you see the overwhelming majority of people are saying they're likely to go on a cruise for their next trip.
That's what I took away. It exceeds 90 when you add them up.
Absolutely. No, I mean, these are great numbers. And I think the specificity of the question saying for your next trip is different than if I were to ask how likely are you to go on a cruise again, right?
Exactly.
So these people are really committed to cruising. Yeah. So looking a little bit at choice and influencers of vacation types, we look at first at why people take vacations. So we have some really interesting things that come out here. But overwhelmingly, we are seeing two categories coming out as the top reason for total why people are taking a vacation. And this is just across all vacation types that they may have taken. 39% are saying to see and do new things. Well, 33% are saying to relax and get rid of stress. So those are kind of two differing vacation purposes, right? One is relaxing and one is go, go, go. But it really does cover the majority of leisure travelers across
Type A and Type B.
Right. And so I'm definitely Type A here. I love to see and do new things. So, and you can see, so the cruise vacation in general, the ocean and the river cruises, particularly river cruises, are attracting more of those people saying that they're going on vacation to see and do new things. So when you're thinking about how you're messaging a cruise vacation and how you're really positioning that to leisure travelers, to seeing and doing new things is a great thing that you're capable of doing on cruises, and you want to be sure to highlight that. We're looking at similar data here, but just broken out by the generation groups, because we do understand that there's different motivations based on your age and where you are in your life. So why you're taking a vacation, again, still for Gen Y, we're seeing a lot of to see and do new things. But we do see a few more people on the for the land-based vacations are relaxing to get rid of stress as well. We've got 38% there. But overwhelmingly, 48% of those going on a cruise are saying it's the purpose of their trip is seeing and doing new things. Similarly, we see a very, very similar breakout for Gen X. A little bit higher on the to relax and get rid of stress side for cruise vacations, but that could just be, again, the time that they're at in their life, and maybe they've been on a cruise vacation before, so now they can go ahead and just relax while they're on that cruise. When we get into the older generation, so we've got the boomers here, still seeing and doing new things do come out as high for both boomers and traditionalists, as well as relaxing and getting rid of stress. A little bit less so for those traditionalists in terms of relaxing and getting rid of stress. This age group, as you can see, from 1917 to 1947 would be their birth year. They may have a little less stress if they're already retired. And a lot more of them are looking for some family time. So that would be their primary purpose for a land-based vacation, is that family time. When we look at most visited vacation destinations for both cruisers and non-cruisers, we are seeing the Caribbean coming out at 37%. Particularly high for cruisers at 67% or 60%, I apologize. But we do see when we compare land-based vacations to cruises, there is a difference in the choice of destinations, but there are some popular destinations across both the Caribbean, Mexico, Alaska, Europe, Hawaii, Bermuda, and Australia. And we saw some changes year over year. So you can't see the data in this chart to see what we did last year, but you can see we're seeing an increase in cruisers to the Caribbean, as well as non-Mediterranean Europe, as well as down a little bit in Canada and a little less in Hawaii. So just some year-over-year changes, but for the most part, some of those hotspots are still hotspots. When we look at split out the non-cruisers specifically, so we're kind of comparing all-inclusive land-based versus just land-based. You do see Caribbean is still pretty high. Canada is obviously very high for land-based, but not so much for all-inclusive. So you could see a little bit of the split here. Mexico's about 50-50 in terms of all-inclusive versus traditional land-based. And Cuba, some pretty high numbers there for the all-inclusive side. Again, this is for non-cruisers. Now, when we look at cruise vacations versus land-based vacations, and we ask those respondents, are cruises better or worse than land-based vacations in terms of, so what are the highlights of cruising, basically, the things that you think cruising does better than land-based? And we've ordered these in descending order here. So in terms of relaxing and getting away from it all, 86% of people are saying cruises are better. So that's a great number, particularly given those top two motivations, right? One was relax and get away from it all, and number two was to see and do new things. And if you look here, the number two thing that cruises are doing better is a chance to visit several different destinations. So really, you're getting the best of both worlds on a cruise based on what the respondents to the survey are saying. Based on our cruisers, these are those that are saying, this is why I take a cruise, basically. So that's some really good, promising data here.
And I particularly like the fourth line, Jennifer, with being easy to plan and arrange at 82%, because that clearly speaks to the fact that the vast majority of cruises are booked through travel agents, through travel agencies. So that's why they're so easy to plan and arrange, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Across all of our studies, we do ask some questions about just other travel types in our syndicated hotel and rental car and airline studies. And we do see that the travel agent is really coming back. And I think a lot of it has to do with the cruise line industry in terms of the amount of bookings we see in our study is going up through travel agencies across all different types. But I think a lot of it is credited due to these first booking experiences people often have with a travel agent for a cruise. You can see also being hassle-free and being reliable are right up there as well. So I think that's all due to the travel agent there. So now we've got additional information around the influence on your cruise purchase. So how do these different aspects of decision-making influence your decision to purchase a cruise vacation? So when you see that the number one answer across the board is trips and ports. So if you are traveling to see and do new things, of course, those trips and ports are going to really be trip ports and destinations. That's going to be number one, right? Price and value, it's always going to be a factor in leisure travel. I don't think across the board that's ever going to go away completely. But the fact that it's not number one is very promising to me. They're really looking, cruisers are looking to see and do new things, and that's their primary motivation here. Of course, the number three, trip itinerary, days at sea, those things are important as well because you do have to fit that into your vacation time. So, and these motivations are pretty similar in terms of rankings across the generation groups. We do see a little bit more focus on families within the Gen Y or millennial group, as well as the cruise ship size. So those are things that are coming up a bit more just because they are probably going to be traveling with family. And activities and onboard entertainment, you see, is a big one there at 28% for Gen Y and millennials also. Again, here breaking the same thing out for cruise influences by generation, just in a more visual manner. You do see trip ports and destinations is still the highest in terms of reason for influencing your trip, followed by trip days at sea. And the price value piece, when we break it out this way visually, you can see it's much more the boomer generation than the Gen X and Gen Ys that are driving that price value to be higher in the rankings of this list. But there are also a few areas you can see where Gen Ys are really considering them important. So activities and entertainment and programs for children and families. So we've asked here, do you consider cruises a good way to sample destinations for non-cruise vacations? And there's not a lot of change year over year, a little bit of up and down, but for the most part, 90% of people are saying, yes, a cruise is a great way to sample other destinations for your non-cruise vacation. So, and across generations, it's pretty similar, a little lower in the traditionalist area because, again, a lot of them are already making their land-based decisions based on where their family is. So they may not be looking to sample as much anyway. We also asked if you've returned to a destination you've visited by cruise. And the majority of people have, so 57% in 2017. This is down a little bit from 2016, but it's not, a lot of this is driven down by Gen X. So the Gen X generation, they were far more likely in 2016 at 66%. That has decreased to about 52% to returning to a destination they've visited before. But again, that just may have a bit to do with their current vacation motivations, which is to see and do new things.
And Jennifer,
and their stage in life. Yes.
Just a quick question. Now, have you returned to a destination you visited by cruise, returning to it by cruise again, or returning to it by land?
I think the intent of the question was by land.
Got it. That's how I took it. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people that I always say, oh, we go on a great cruise and we see these wonderful destinations, and then I end up booking another cruise. I very rarely end up going back to the destination by land.
That's probably very true for a lot of these people in the Gen X group as well. They may not be visiting it by land, but they may be returning by cruise, right? If they're just booking another cruise vacation, we know based on our previous data that a lot of people who've already booked a cruise are going to book another one. That's what they're saying. They're definitely going on a cruise again. So, yeah. When we look at, do you typically extend your vacation by spending a few days in the port city? Again, this is down a little bit, but it's still, the majority of people are saying that they do extend their vacation by spending a few days in the port city. I think part of this is just people trying to cram as much vacation as they can into their vacation. They may, opt to spend more time on the ship and seeing those new destinations, though. We've asked about, here's the length of the most recent cruise. And we have it broken out here by some demographics. So you could see when we look at the age line, basically, the longer the trip, generally the older the average age of the respondent or the traveler. I mean, this makes sense logically because a lot of people don't have 16 days or more to take off in a row from work. So as you get older and you are a little retired or you have that time available, you're a little more established in your life, you will see that average cruise length going up. Across the different household incomes as well, you could see 6 to 8 is really kind of falling in the highlight of across all incomes, nationalities, and genders. That's the average we're seeing, 6 to 8 days. But there are some trends here and there as you move up or down the household income scale as well. And when we compare these to 2016, we're not seeing a lot of change. So looking at this by generation group, again, just giving you that really visual representation. Again, 6 to 8 days is the majority of where we're seeing cruisers land. But we do see 3 to 5 days as being pretty common for that Gen Y millennial generation. Again, they were a little bit more price conscious. They often may have careers and families to juggle, and they're looking for something with families. So 3 to 5 days may fit what their need is a little bit more. And then you can see on the 9 to 15 days, we're seeing traditionalists kind of pop there at 29%. So again, it's pretty related to your age and how established you are in your life and how long of a cruise you'd like to go on. So right now we've got this slide that's called these cruise classes, and we had a long discussion about this, Charlie, and I think These are more aptly named types as opposed to classes, because we're comparing contemporary to river cruises here, as well as premium and luxury. But the overwhelming majority of people are saying 84% are using a contemporary cruise line. And we did see one of the surprising findings here as well, was millennials are less likely to sail on contemporary cruise lines than other age cohorts, and they're more likely to sail on luxury lines. Again, this is self-identified, so what a millennial defines as a luxury cruise line may be slightly different than what a boomer or traditionalist is defining as a luxury
Exactly.
cruise line.
The perception, the consumer's perception of what that luxury is or premium is, exactly that plays. But this bodes well for agency owners and agents, because certainly as CLIA has shown time and time again, luxury cruising pays the most, and to see them lean more toward river and premium and luxury is a good sign.
Absolutely. When we look at travel planning, and this is really just how you're gathering the research, who's deciding the final plans in cruisers versus non-cruisers, this is relatively consistent from last year. But travel agents and children under 18 are more likely to influence a cruiser's vacation planning decision than a non-cruiser's vacation. So you can see there for a cruiser, in terms of research gathering, 11% of cruisers are saying that they're gathering that research through a travel agent, and 6% are saying that's how they're deciding their final plans, is through that travel agent. And of course, it is higher when compared to non-cruisers for travel agents, as well as those children under 18. Looking at the features and amenities that cruisers want and those that they use. Now, this is interesting. We had some great discussions when we're first looking through this data around the things that people say they want, and then the people that they end up saying they use on the ship, right?
Are you referring to me in the gym, Jennifer?
Yes. And you know what? I would be the same way, though. I always look for a gym, right? So we see a lot of people saying they want to see that gym, but then when we look at how much they're actually using it, not so much. So I think you probably get on the ship and you see all these other wonderful things you could be doing, and you find that lovely restaurant, and the gym just goes out the window, right? But it's still an important decision-making tool, whether or not it is available.
There are some really interesting metrics on that page.
Yes, I don't want to go by too quickly. So there are some good ones. I think the entertainment piece was the other one that really stood out to us, right? A lot of people are using the amenity for the onboard entertainment. 54%, it's gone up 14% from last year.
Wow.
But it's not standing out as something that they're always thinking is the most important when they're booking that trip. And that's likely they just don't understand maybe the quality, or maybe once they get on that ship and they see it, they're like, oh, this is, they just keep coming back, right? As well as the shows and musicals. If you look at onboard entertainment featuring well-known Broadway productions, and you kind of add it together with the next line down, onboard entertainment, shows, musicals, and comedy acts, those are really overwhelmingly standing out as two of the most highly utilized amenities on the ship.
You know, and
even though they're not standing out as most important. Go ahead.
Exactly. This ties in, Jennifer, with what I see from my own personal experience, is that I don't necessarily choose a sailing or a ship or a cruise line based on entertainment, but then when I get on board, the entertainment is just getting better and better and better on all of the lines, and as good, if not better, than some land destinations. And yeah, it definitely resonates with me, what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, and I think this really speaks to the ability of a cruise vacation to surprise and delight. So we always say that whether or not your vacation or any experience matches with your expectations or offers that little something extra to surprise and delight. So I think that when we compare these most important amenities versus the ones that are being utilized, you can tell which things are really the delighters on the trip versus what's table stakes. What do you have to have, to make that decision to go on that vacation versus what's going to really, really bring you back again. So when we look a little bit into travel planning, we do see, and this is, I think, pretty standard across the industry, but cruisers are more likely to book in advance, well in advance, right? So we see the average cruiser is booking between 4 to 6 months and 12 to 18 months before their trip. Non-cruisers are much more spontaneous in their travel, booking about 1 to 3 months before their trip. Of course, it's important to note the role of travel agents. So how often are travel agents used in planning a trip? Cruisers say 22% of the time they're always using a travel agent. Now, these cruisers, for the definition of the study, just to revisit, have been on a cruise in the last 3 years. It's over 3 nights. That does not mean every vacation they take is a cruise. So to say that 22% are always using a travel agent is not always when they're cruising. It's always. Compared to non-cruisers, where even then we're seeing 6% are saying most, also always, and then 6% most of the time when we add that up, we're seeing 12% on average there. And then how often do you use a travel agent to book your trip? Again, cruisers saying 20% of the time, always, 23% of the time, they say most of the time. So we add those up, we've got 43% of cruisers are using a travel agent to book most of their trips. And again, it's not only their cruise vacations that they would be booking through a travel agent at this point.
And I see this as a tremendous opportunity because in as much as travel agents are without a doubt the leading distribution channel for the cruise industry in terms of business, it shows that there is so much untapped business out there. It reminds us as travel professionals that we have to continually educate consumers and create awareness of the existence of travel agents, the value, the fact that we are here. We're not just surviving, we're prospering, and the fact that we provide value that drives greater satisfaction.
Absolutely. And I see, especially in the cruiser group, we've got those two some of the time buckets for using and planning at 29% and 27%. That's a really rich opportunity, right? So those people have been introduced to what you could do as a travel agent and what's available to them. If they have a highly satisfying experience, they're likely to be converted to one of those most of the time or always users, right? And there's a ton of opportunity with the non-cruisers as well. So looking at satisfaction with travel agents, again, this is a really, really great story. Overall, these numbers are great. So courtesy of the travel agent for cruisers, 8.85, non-cruisers, 8.49. So the average for everybody in this study is 8.72 in terms of courtesy, 8.75 for knowledge, and 8.61 for overall satisfaction. So again, on a 10-point scale, these are high end of 8. So the majority of people are really rating you 8s, 9s, and 10s, and that's a really great place to be as a travel agent in terms of creating a satisfying experience for these leisure travelers.
And that's a story to be telling. If I were still selling cruises, if I were still a travel agent and not working for CLIA, I would be drawing from this particular slide quite a lot in terms of the story that I told consumers who may not be using travel agents.
Absolutely. You're doing a great job, and you should be marketing yourself appropriately. This is not a time for humility. So looking at travel companions, we do look at cruise travelers and their accompanying parties. So cruisers are loyal to the experience and they cruise multiple times. And you can see the total number of cruises taken as an adult here is actually going up, about 1 a year, which really makes sense with some of the data we're seeing. The average cruiser they're going on about 1 cruise a year at this point, it looks like, just based on that number going up one. And then when we look at the number of vacations taken in the past 3 years, when we're comparing both land-based and cruise vacationers, again, this is going up, but not at the same rate as the number of cruises. And the number of vacations taken in the past year, 3 days or longer, that included a cruise. This has gone down slightly, but again, I think it could be that 3 days or longer qualifier.
I agree.
Because some people they're managing to fit more into those long weekends, right? So we look at here who's in your travel party. On average, we see 3.85 people. That has gone up slightly. We do see more people traveling with children and infants, though, across the board. And that does speak to the family-friendly nature, as well as just being able to highlight those activities that are available on some of these cruise trips.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and we also see more people going on cruises with their spouses. And again, yeah, overall, we're just seeing some interesting people bringing on more people when they're going on cruises.
And that's
people going with friends.
That's what we're seeing at CLIA is the multi-generational cruising, the friends and family cruising, the affinity cruising, where people are cruising together because they have similar interests. I mean, it's growing exponentially.
Absolutely, yeah. And then combined with the fact that the number of cruises people are taking is going up, it's really looking good. And this last one here we have for you is just satisfaction by who comes with you. Now, I know, Charlie, you had a pretty interesting story about how you like to cruise, but...
Well, you know, I always bring a big group with me, but I have to tell you, some of my favorite cruises, and I hope my family doesn't hear this, but some of my favorite cruises were ones that I traveled on alone. You don't have to please anybody else, you know, you just have to please yourself.
Well, if you're on that Type B cruise to relax and unwind, I imagine it's very nice to go by yourself every once in a while, right? But we do see that people are pretty satisfied across the board, regardless of who is with them. These little hashtags next to the travel alone there, those indicate that it's a little bit small sample. So not as many people are traveling alone based on the previous slide we saw, but people are very happy to be traveling with their friends. But also, I think the numbers around adult children, as you mentioned, those multi-generational cruises, so people traveling with their adult children are quite satisfied as well. So probably getting to relax and let loose a bit, but also see and do new things. I think you probably get the best of both worlds. That was it. That's everything we have. I think there's a lot to digest, but I hope you all find it as valuable as I found it exciting to dig through. So.
Well, Jennifer, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and being such a terrific partner that you are in helping to support our travel agency and travel agent community here at CLIA. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on CLIA Cruise TV. So if we went through the slides pretty quickly, we had 41 slides to get through, and I think we did it in just about 46 minutes. So great job, Jennifer.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. It was a wonderful time to present. So I'm very excited about the state of the cruise industry. As well
as we are at CLIA, and as well everyone on this call should be. So thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to be on our call today. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.